Your first machine quilting project should not feel like brain surgery with a seam ripper. Ultra complicated, crazy scary. It does not have to be that difficult. Let me show you an easier way to begin. I'm Susan Smith, and you're in my studio, Stitched by Susan. You're seeing my long arm Stella over my shoulder. My quilting journey has been just that, a process, a journey. I began as a child and young adult hand quilting. Eventually, over time, I learned to quilt at my domestic sewing machine. And then, because I loved it so much, I did, in fact, invest in the long arm. And I've been doing this for 10 years or so now. Absolutely love it. However, I hear so often from students and fellow quilters at guilds, and even just people that I meet and get chatting about quilts and fabrics with, that it's really, really difficult to get started. Where do you start? How do you start? So let's talk about some of the early projects that are good skill building exercises to begin your machine quilting expertise. It is a legitimate worry or consideration when you're thinking about quilting a project. If you are just beginning, don't start with a quilt that is an heirloom, that is precious, that you've invested a ton of time in, or one of your friends has invested a lot of time or money into. Know that there is going to be a learning curve, and think of it as skill building. Each project is going to build on the one before to build those skills. But what I recommend starting with is something small, at least for size, like a mug rug. This is just a little, about a 6-inch square. My friend Pris made it for me, and it's pieced like a quilt block would be. She's done some quilting in this block around it and a little bit of stitching in kind of the dishes of the seams. So it's very simple. This is an ideal beginner's project. You can absolutely quilt this at your sewing machine. You can quilt it with your regular stitching needle and foot, all of those things, but add some quilting detail to it. You'll start getting used to the feel of quilting through layers, through the fabric layers and the batting. You'll start learning techniques for how to base those layers together and just get the feel of working with it, pulling up your bobbin thread to the top. All those things are great beginner skills, and you learn them simply by doing them. I have a course, Machine Quilting for Beginners, in which I show these basic steps. But for today, I just want to encourage you, start with something that's small and non-threatening and get some of this stuff under your belt and get used to the feel of your machine and the feel of the layers. Pris even made a cute little piece backing for this. Isn't that darling? So from there, still in the small scale though, think about placemats or perhaps table runners, or here's a great idea, baby quilts. I've got one here, also made by Pris. This same friend makes a lot of baby quilts and donates them to her local NICU. And so this is one of them. And this little quilt is a printed panel. I know you've all seen these in quilt and fabric shops. And so there's no piecing involved. So no time is invested in piecing this, right? There's no attachment to it. It's just a panel. This is a fabulous way to practice your quilting skills. So clearly there's lines on it where the panel is divided. So that would be a great place to practice straight line quilting. But if you're wanting to get into free motion quilting, this is also a superb way to practice. So free motion quilting at your domestic sewing machine means that you're moving the fabric around under the needle. And if you're fortunate enough to have the use of a long arm like I do, then you're moving with the handlebars, you're moving the machine over the fabric. Either way, it's free motion, right? Your hands are determining the design entirely. So if that's something you want to experiment with, this is such a good project. There are no seam allowances to fuss with, right? There's no worry that things aren't square or flat because really it's just a piece of fabric that you're quilting on. So it's a great way to start. But from there, any baby quilt is still a small and not too fearful project, am I right? Mostly because it is little. It's a great way to practice if you're working on a new design. And if you, in fact, you just are new to quilting at your sewing machine because it's over so quickly. So each one can be a learning process. Another good source or resource for projects to quilt is any type of compassion or charity organization. So many cities and towns across North America have quilting guilds, and many, many guilds will have some type of organization within them that makes quilts for charity or for giving away. And in many cases, those quilts are already pieced by someone else, freeing you of the need to piece them, right? So you'll get a piece top, and often they come with the batting and the backing to go with it. All you need to do is put the layers together and quilt it. Bingo! This is a fabulous way for you to practice your quilting. Usually they're small, again, so low commitment levels. You can decide if you like your new design or not. And also, frankly, a low level of expectation for the quilting. In all these cases, the quilts are going to people who are not discriminating quilters, right? And so the guild or whatever the organization is, they're not looking for artistry or perfection or expert quilting. They're just looking to get the quilt done, right? So this is where you come in. It's a fabulous way to practice your quilting skills. If you don't have a local guild that has some type of organization like that, Google it. Certainly, Project Linus, Linus, link in the description. Project Linus is countrywide, perhaps even international organization that does this type of work, but there are many, many others that are more localized, or individuals that are heading them up, and maybe who they're for is more specific. So pick something that means a little something to you, invest some time and give in it, and buff up your quilting skills at the same time. Here's a phrase that I want you to remember as you're doing this work. I mean, you can think of it as practice, I guess. That does not sound like a very nice thing that I want to do, but skill building, that sounds like something to me, right? So even as you're quilting, if you think of it as building skills, that will help you when you're a little frustrated, maybe with the tension at your sewing machine, or perhaps getting stitches that are too long or too little. Just think to yourself, okay, I'm building my skill. I'm getting to know my machine. I'm getting to know my materials. Every quilt that you work on will get better and better, and your skills will grow and grow and grow. Working on small pieces to begin with lets you accept the oopsies that most likely will happen. In fact, I can almost promise they will happen without severe heartbreak. So we talked about not beginning with your most precious quilt tops, right? That's why. If something goes wrong, or if you quilt a design and you're not thrilled with the design that you chose, it's not a major heartbreak, right? So starting with smaller designs, non-threatening projects is just a most excellent way to do it. But speaking of not starting with heirlooms, there is another perhaps unexpected place where you might find projects to practice on. And I've got one right here. This is a vintage quilt top. Judging by the fabrics, I'm going to say it's from the 1940s or thereabouts, right? So it's about 80 years old at this point. You're getting close to that. And I acquire these vintage tops in various places, and I'll give you some sources in a few moments. But let me first point out why I think these are great practice projects. They're often hand-pieced and often made with not super high quality fabrics. Perhaps because that's how it began, or perhaps because it's 80 years old and it's been in someone's attic or spare bedroom or whatever all this time. And so it's good for practicing because it's not a delicate heirloom, and it's not dear to your heart, right? It's not something that your mother or grandmother or you spent hours and hours making. What you're doing is taking something that is essentially probably a cast off. I got this one at a garage sale, right? And you're giving it a second lease on life. So you're honoring someone who pieced it before you by getting it to the finish line. So again, don't get too caught up in it. Don't think to yourself, oh, I've got to do fancy quilting on this because it's old. It is old, but it's not really an heirloom. So accept this as a really good practice project and just quilt it, wash it afterwards, and then use it and enjoy it. And I mentioned I would tell you where to acquire some of these. They're getting a little harder to find than they used to be. What I do is I just keep my eyes open and I'm aware. So whenever I'm in a thrift or secondhand store, I'll just take a quick look through the bedding and sheets. They're usually hanging on hangers because sometimes these quilts are there. This one I got at a garage sale. Every so often, you'll find one because people do find these in their attics, in their back rooms, right? And they don't want them. They don't want to finish them. And so you can. And these become treasures to me. And I think can be a treasure for you too. So these are a bit larger than our baby quilts, right? So now we've kind of graduated up. We've started with the mug rugs. We've gone on to baby quilts, but as your skills grow, this is a next great step because again, you've not invested the time in piecing it and sewing it together, right? You've already got that all done. All you need to do is get the backing and quilt it. And it is so rewarding to me, so rewarding to have quilts like this to treasure and to think of the new lease on life that they've been given. So excellent practice project, vintage quilt tops. As you embark on your quilting journey, please do remember this. Like seriously, listen to Susan's voice in your head telling you that perfect is not necessary. Finished is always better. Nobody I know has ever snuggled under a finished quilt and looked at it critically and said, the tension wasn't very great on this. I wish she'd have done better. No, we never say that. We just appreciate the quilt and the snuggling quality of it, right? So done is always better. So go out there, find yourself a project and get started. If you're interested in free motion quilting, look for my free PDF. I've got a link above and below, and it's called 3 Steps Toward Free Motion Quilting, taking you from a super easy version into more complicated skill building steps. And I've also mentioned in the description below my course, Machine Quilting for Beginners, where I walk you through things like needle choices, thread choices, etc. So if you need more of those ideas, know that there are quilters out there wanting to help you get going on your own quilting journey. We want to see you with the finished quilts.